West Virginia Democrat Joe Manchin just came out to say that he supports a delay in the vote for Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh so the FBI can investigate allegations of sexual assault. Senator's in a tough spot on the issue because he's up for re-election in a deeply red state. President Trump actually won by 42 points in 2016. Adding to Senator Manchin's woes, President Trump is set to hold a campaign rally in Wheeling, West Virginia on Saturday. It's actually his second rally in the state in just 2 months. He'll be there on behalf of Manchin's opponent, Republican State Attorney General Patrick Morrissey. Internal GOP polls show Morrissey and Manchin in a statistical dead heat. They each have garnered 45% of the vote with a 10% undecided vote. Joining me now to talk about all of this is Brad. Brad, I apologize. They told me your last name.
McElhinny. Hi.
McElhinny. Thank you, Brad. Sorry, I apologize. It's been a long afternoon, my friend. I do want to ask you, though, how timely, Brad. You know, Manchin is a Democrat in a red state, overwhelmingly supportive of the president. What do you make of Manchin's support for actually delaying the Supreme Court vote?
Oh, boy. Well, you know, it continues to put him in a difficult position for yet another week, although buying some time may provide some clarity. There actually is some polling that came out today, and take it with a grain of salt, but polling by Public Opinion Strategies showing that 60% of West Virginians would support Manchin voting for Kavanaugh. That Public Opinion Strategies poll was on behalf of Judicial Crisis Network, which is why I say maybe take it with a grain of salt. But that 60% is roughly in line with our own West Virginia MetroNews West Virginia poll that showed earlier this summer 62% of West Virginians say Manchin ought to vote for Kavanaugh. Also 60%, that 60% number, about where we've seen West Virginia's overall support for President Trump, who, as you said, is coming here this weekend to Wheeling, West Virginia, his second visit campaigning for Patrick Morrissey, who has twice earned statewide office here as West Virginia's Attorney General.
So, Brad, you talk about how tight the race is for Manchin at this point. Let's say that Manchin decides to vote against Judge Kavanaugh. How do you think that could impact the Senate race?
You know, I mentioned this Public Opinion Strategies poll that came out today. And again, that was for Judicial Crisis Network. So it may have a bit of a point of view, but the numbers are in line with what we've seen elsewhere. That poll, a subset, showed that 43% of West Virginians say Manchin voting for Kavanaugh would actually make no difference in whether they vote for Manchin or not. 33% say voting for Kavanaugh by Manchin make it more likely that the voters, would vote for Manchin, and 23% less likely. So a bit of a split there, but 43% saying no difference at all. In terms of how Manchin votes for Kavanaugh. Manchin has been on the scene in West Virginia for years and years and years, was governor of the state for 2 terms, now seeking re-election as the state senator. But in the meantime, West Virginia has tended to vote Republican, whereas before it was reliably Democrat.
So you talk about the split there in the polling of how voters there feel about how he decides on Manchin. But do we know, has Manchin spoken out about how he might determine to make that decision?
Yeah, he's talked somewhat abstractly. He's talked about Kavanaugh's record, Kavanaugh's legal qualifications, his judicial philosophy. But here's what would have been the kicker: Kavanaugh's views on health care. And some may take that to mean Roe versus Wade. But Manchin, like many Democrats, has been voting on an aspect of the Affordable Care Act, that being the pre-existing conditions aspect. And West Virginians are of an interesting mind when it comes to the Affordable Care Act. If you ask people if they're in support of Obamacare, they'd probably say no. But many of the provisions of the Affordable Care Act, West Virginians would see it as providing greater access to insurance, and that pre-existing conditions clause has been popular among West Virginians. And so Manchin has been campaigning on that issue more broadly, but is part of the Kavanaugh package that he has been taking a close look at.
I want to talk about Manchin's opponent, Patrick Morrissey. How do you think he could take advantage of the situation?
Yeah, well, he already is in his own statements, his Twitter account, the president's visit coming this weekend to West Virginia. Morrissey has done everything he can to align himself with President Trump in a state that views President Trump with 60% popularity. So this visit by President Trump surely can't hurt. tomorrow. It will be the second visit. But Morrissey, having said on Twitter, in his own Twitter account, that that he thinks that Manchin should make a decision now, should say how he's going to vote, calling him gutless. So a little bit of goading by Morrissey, and I think that those who attend this rally in Wheeling, West Virginia tomorrow are going to hear more of the same.
Is there anything that the president, we know we mentioned that rally that he's holding on Saturday in West Virginia. Is there anything the president can weaponize about Senator Manchin's record that could really harm him potentially in this election?
Yeah, well, he could, but it's a little bit tricky for Trump, too. Manchin has been among the most reliable Democrats potentially voting on what Trump wants. Voted for Trump's prior Supreme Court nominee. Here talking about Manchin potentially being in play to vote for Kavanaugh. There have been some other issues that have been pretty narrow in this narrowly divided Senate, where Manchin has been willing to go the way Trump sees it, in part because Manchin is a traditionally conservative Democrat, but also because Manchin's constituents here in the state often see it Trump's way.
Do you think that this rally will be somewhat of a boost to Morrissey in the polls?
Well, that's certainly Morrissey's hope. And I attended Trump's rally here in Charleston maybe a little less than a month ago. And Trump's promise, of course, there's often some hyperbole, is that Morrissey might get maybe a 12-point bounce out of it. I don't know that we saw that, but we certainly saw a bit of a bump in the polls, and Morrissey hopes to see more.
Brad McElhinny, so grateful you could join us, especially at this time, to break down West Virginia politics.
All right, good timing. Thank you.
Thanks so much.